Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Schmidt, and I am from the Show Me State of Missouri. This is my 5th summit, and I am pleased, very, very pleased to come back to the stage after lunch and welcome Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan and Michael Wood. Lieutenant Governor Duncan was the 12th Lieutenant Governor for the state of Georgia. He also served as a member of the Georgia House of Representatives. He is a husband, a father of 3. And I just learned that he was drafted from Georgia Tech to the Marlins and was a pitcher in their minor leagues for 6 years. So that's fun. Michael Wood is a Marine combat veteran, small business owner, and was a political candidate. So please welcome to the stage Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan and Michael Wood.
All right, is this on? Okay, test. So, I know that Heath just spoke. I just can't resist. I'm so sorry, but just like fuck these people. I mean, Jesus Christ. Turns out that if you let a bunch of seditionists out of jail, bad things are going to happen. And I mean, they can make their little MAGA brown shirts or whatnot, try their little street violence. I don't care if they're above the law, which essentially they are because they've got the pardon right there. I'm not going to stop talking. I hope you don't stop talking. And Tim Miller yesterday, he was talking about how we shouldn't be afraid to talk about politics. And it is insane that in the United States of America, that even has to be said out loud. And I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not afraid today. We're going to talk politics. We're going to keep talking politics. And I'm glad that you're here with us. All right. So I have a special place in my heart for Republicans, members of the GOP who endorsed Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, this past election. And it took courage, and it's not easy, going against your tribe. I'm not going to mention any names up here, but I was pretty disappointed in a whole lot of other Republicans who I know knew better, and even if they couldn't endorse Trump, they still wanted to keep their hands clean by not going the next logical step, the only step, which is to support the Democrat. Now, the person next to me did not do that, or he supported the Democrat, and I was so impressed whenever I saw him in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, campaigning for the vice president. So, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, what made you do that? Why did you feel the need to not just put out a statement or something, but actually go and talk to people in the swing states?
Well, Michael, call me Geoff, please. The most common answer or conversation I had leading up to it was, Geoff, just sit on the sidelines. Just don't endorse somebody. I get it you don't like Donald Trump. I get it that you think he's dangerous. I get it that you are really worried about his leadership style. You've been behind the curtain with him. You've watched him make these shallow, dumb decisions that are reckless, all of that. Just sit on the sidelines and don't endorse anybody. And as I sat there and would look at my 3 kids and realize I'm in a position of influence, right? People are watching what we're doing and how we're doing it, and I just couldn't imagine sitting on the sidelines and not doing something. And that doing something meant a lot of different things for me in this past election cycle. It was supporting Nikki Haley. It was supporting anybody but Donald Trump for the most part in the Republican primary. When that became inevitable, then I entertained the idea of running in the no labels category and had some conversations there. And then I looked up and said, you know what, I don't want to sit on the sidelines and watch Donald Trump win this and think that I was just coward to not stand up and do the right thing. And so that's why I first endorsed Joe Biden and then endorsed Kamala Harris. And looking back, although we didn't win the election, I wouldn't change a thing.
You were in the state house, obviously you're lieutenant governor. What was the reaction in Republican circles? Not just the electeds, but also the donors, everybody who sort of runs in Republican land. Did you get any blowback? You talked about your son at the DNC. What was it like after you made that decision?
Well, I think it's interesting, and many of you probably have experienced this too or continue to experience this. In group settings, it's a very visceral reaction from Republicans or conservatives in general, right? It's kind of like groupthink takes over. But one-on-one conversations with some of the highest elected officials in Georgia, statewide elected officials and community elected officials, one-on-one, they're very supportive. They're like, I get it, the guy's a train wreck. I get it, he's taking the party in the wrong direction. I get it, we can't talk about politics in the public square because of this guy. But in group settings, they're not. And so it was, the most common thing that happens when somebody walks up to me, a former colleague that's elected, is they kind of look both ways like this, make sure nobody's listening. They get closer, like, hey, you're doing the right thing. Well, I appreciate you saying that one-on-one. But look, this is what it is. I don't like reality. I don't like waking up and reading the Wall Street Journal and seeing all the reckless things that are going on domestically and internationally just based upon a hothead. But that's the reality that we're dealing with. And so we've got to figure out ways to work with reality in how we think about the midterms and how we think about a 4-year reelect or campaign for president. We need to think about how we elect state representatives and county commissioners. Do we reward behavior that parrots Donald Trump? Do we reward behavior that embarrasses people and demeans people and doesn't really put real plans in place? Do we reward people that just love the sound of broken glass but not solutions? I mean, if that's what this comes to, then we're going to continue to get this over and over and over and over again.
So what I don't understand, if you're in Congress or if you're in some sort of public office, I don't understand why these guys hold on to it so much and why they're so afraid to upset people. Like, what? You've been elected to many things over the years. What exactly are these people? Are they really just afraid that in Walmart somebody's going to come up and yell at them? Because it seems like if you're a senator or you're in Congress or something and you lose an election, that probably stings a little bit, but I'm sure you can get a pretty good job after that. I'm sure you can do other things. Are they really just afraid of being yelled at by their neighbors?
So I used to say this well before the 2020 debacle. I was not a politician. You heard I was a baseball player of all things. Didn't make any money, but I got to spend 6 years in the minor leagues. It was awesome. I probably played in half of y'all's hometowns. Now, I thought it was awesome. My wife didn't think it was very awesome. And then I was in the business world, and then I got into politics out of nowhere. And it just was amazing to me when I first walked into the room, you would realize that a majority of the people in their mind, that was the most important thing they've ever done, right? And we all have something in our mind that's the most important thing that we've ever done, right? For me, it's my family, right? I would do anything for my family, my wife, my 3 kids. Like, that's how I'm wired. I've given up jobs. I've certainly taken the hot seat in politics. But most people, when they wake up, the most important thing that they've done is being in elected office. It's given them a taste of power, whether it's big or small. It's given them an opportunity to sit in the front row. It's given them an opportunity to hang out with the rich and famous. It's given them an opportunity to do all this stuff. And so they will do anything to protect that, even if it means saying falsely that the 2020 election was rigged, even if it means acting like Donald Trump is a strong leader, even if it means patting Vladimir Putin on the back instead of supporting Ukraine, even if it means pardoning January 6th criminals. They'll do anything to maintain that spot, and that's sad, but that's reality. And I think that's one of these growth moments for us that care about democracy, care about the future of this country for the right reasons, is we can't complain about reality. We have to deal with reality. And that, to me, means coming back to being intellectually honest. It's not just enough to point fingers and say, Donald Trump sucks, because guess what he does? It's not just enough to say he's a threat to democracy, because people have become numb to it. They don't really believe you. And so we have to be tactical and strategic in how we talk about it. And we have to make sure that people are intellectually honest. Right? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes us good at our jobs. That's what makes us good as being parents. It's being intellectually honest, not saying what's popular, but saying what's important. And so I think it's interesting. I write a column every couple of weeks for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And it takes me forever to write these things because that's just not my forte, right? My wife is still amazed that I even produce something with 700 to 800 words in it. Whatever. For now it works. It takes me like 5 days, but I love it. I'm like more satisfied when I get done. It's like, I finished. My kids can start to talk to me again. But I was doing some research for the next article that I'm writing, and it's interesting, the support for Donald Trump is, 50+% of Americans still support Donald Trump, 80+% of Republicans still support Donald Trump. It's mind-blowing, but it is what it is. But when you ask them the individual issues, like, for example, do you think DEI was the reason for the plane crash? No, 93%. When you ask the question, should he have released the January 6th, these numbers are, you just go down the list. Should we turn our back on Ukraine? So individually, people don't support what he's doing, but in the cumulative they do. That's reality. That's the conversation you need to have with your neighbors, with your spouses, with your coworkers, with the people in your community, is just encourage them to be intellectually honest. It's a long answer for your question.
No, that was great. That was great. So on that note of being intellectually honest, I'm a conservative, you're a conservative. I used to be a Republican. I actually don't know what you are these days. Is there anything that you're seeing out of the Trump administration that you're sort of like, I hate the guy, he's an SOB, I get all that, but I mean, that's kind of working my old conservative muscles. Because I'm seeing things that maybe, 10 years ago I could have seen myself getting excited about, but it's all through like a carnival, weird, funhouse mirror. It's all being done in the worst way possible. Maybe we do have too many people. Maybe we do have too many people working for the federal government. I'm sure we do. Is this the best way to go about it? Absolutely not. So is there anything you're seeing that you're kind of like, yeah, I might be able to get behind that?
Let's start to the first part of what you talked about, trying to define who I am. Right now, for the next few years, I'm comfortable just calling myself an American. An American that cares about the future of this country across all divides. I'm conservative by nature. I think a lot of the country is conservative by nature. I'm just not angry about it. I don't think calling somebody a name actually solves a problem. And so working through the details, details do matter. Now, as far as conservative ideas, I think the Trump administration has a lot of the top lines right on some of this stuff. For example, you name them. I mean, looking for a way to shrink the size of government. I think we should all look for ways to shrink the size of the government. But if any business was to do a restructuring project like this, they would take enough time and common sense. They wouldn't worry about the headlines, they'd worry about the results. And the results would be better and more effective if you broke down a team and you analyzed each agency and you had 90 days to present reports, and this would be what a 5% shrinkage would look like. And instead, it's not about the actual results. It's about the headline. It's about, some of this stuff is all about one tweet. It's about one news cycle. It's about changing and shifting. So yes, I do think the federal government is too big. I say that as an American. I think all Americans should be concerned about it. I think our debt is headed in the wrong direction. I think all Americans should be concerned about that and have a plan. I think DOGE on its surface is partially able to go in and help, but not the way they're doing it. I think ending the war between Ukraine and Russia is a great noble task. We should all want that. Nobody wants lives to be lost, but not at the peril of turning our back on Ukraine and handing the keys to Europe to Vladimir Putin. That makes no sense. Going back to the previous question, this is about intellectual honesty. None of that makes sense. But until we the people start digging in, until we the people start actually caring about this stuff in mass, we're going to continue to see this go over and over and over again. It concerns me with things like the economy, right? Nothing gets Americans' attention more than the economy. And I really, really am worried about the economy. I'm a little bit of a nerd and pay attention to the 10-year note, and that tells me that the smart money, the big money, the real money is worried about inflation being a continued growth problem from here. I worry about the trade issues. I worry about the chaos in the markets. There's a lot of things that I worry about. And I don't worry about that from a political standpoint. I don't really care about politics. I care about that as a business owner. I care about that as a father. I care about that as somebody who wants to retire in a respectable period of time. We should all be concerned about that. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all of us.
A few years ago, you wrote a book called GOP 2.0, Next Republican Party after MAGA. How's that going?
Thanks for the question. It's still 288 pages of being truth. I talk a lot about in the book what I call my pet project, policy, empathy, and tone. And Heath and crew here, I want to thank them. Years ago when I first released the book, they gave me the opportunity to kind of launch the book to the world. And there was this thought around policy, empathy, and tone. Just imagine, Democrat, Republican, Independent, wherever you are, if you elected people that went to office and they actually won on the merits of the policy that they stood for. Right? Just imagine what America would look like if we had leaders in place. Used empathy to understand the other side. Not because you want to give in or give ground, but because when you truly understand the other side's opinion, it makes you a better decision maker. And use a tone that invites and encourages. Pet project. I'm still optimistic. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic to see it play out. I mean, a lot of the things I talk about in the book were things that I test drove in the Georgia Senate. When I got elected in 2012, got sworn in 2013 as a state representative, I knew nothing. I knew why I was conservative, but I didn't understand the mechanics of being in elected office. And then I woke up a few years into my term as a state representative. I was like director of unimportant stuff at the Capitol. I mean, I had a couple of really big bills that I passed based upon some rural hospitals and some underage drinking things, but I just always thought there's a better way to do this. And so I ran for the job of lieutenant governor, because in Georgia, the lieutenant governor gets to really set the tempo for the legislature. You pick the bills that come forward, you pick the committees and the chairs. It's actually a really important job for 40 legislative days out of the year. And my thought was, I'm going to test drive this theory that you can be conservative but not angry. And so I would do things like go meet with the Democratic caucus before we'd bring a bill forward and say, hey, here's a bill. I get it, you guys are digging in against it. But is there anything that we could do to the bill that would kind of soften the edges to bring you back into the fold? And almost every time there was something that was inconsequential, right? Because at the state level, we're not dealing with the federal kind of game that's played. And so watching that work, watching the relationships that we would build, watching the fact that bipartisan legislation that gets voted on and passed is always a higher quality legislation than a partisan vote. It just is. And I watched the fruit of that. And so in those 4 years I was lieutenant governor in Georgia, we had an especially really fun time for those 4 years. Of course, we had the pandemic like everybody else, but we also had the additional civil unrest that played out, and we watched the importance of working across party lines, and we passed the hate crimes legislation. Of course, we had the 2020 election debacle. And I was grateful of Governor Kemp and Brad Raffensperger and others that we all were able to kind of join up and dig in. So GOP 2.0 is hopeful. But look, I don't know if the Republican Party is recoverable. I really, truly don't know. And I say that as I stand here as an American, right? This Georgia GOP decided to kick me out, which I asked them, the first question I asked was, what took you so long? Because they've lost their way. All they care about is Donald Trump. They don't care about voters or citizens. And I don't know what happens. I mean, look, if Donald Trump ends up being the smartest evil genius ever, and he ends up pulling the rabbit out of the hat, and all this goes well, and the economy's strong, and the world is all super peaceful, then that MAGA is going to be a thing forever, or at least my political lifetime. My guess is that a majority of Americans are going to grow tired of his games in the circus if we go to where the puck's going. And so we're going to look up at the midterms, and we're going to look up at the 4-year cycle, and we're going to see an America that's fiscally conservative, socially tired, worn, embarrassed, and hopefully we've got a party that, and quite honestly, the time I spent on the campaign trail with Harris, the teams and the Democrats were fantastic all around the country. But a lot of what I heard from them was that their party had gone way too far left for their liking. And so I do think there's this moment of this opportunity for a majority of Americans to band together and say, hey, we're going to look past the big top line issues, and we're going to work together to create a better America.
So last question, since I know we're running short on time here. I mean, this is something that I've struggled with for 3 or 4 years now. And I mean, if you support trade, if you support vaccines, and now if you support brave Federalist Society lawyers, I guess you have to be a Democrat. So my question with that is really unfair, but I sort of give you a heads up. Are you going to vote for Jon Ossoff?
You saved the best one for last. Let's talk about Jon Ossoff, first of all. As a Democratic senator, he's done a great job representing the constituent needs and services. I know our office worked very, very closely with his office throughout the first 2 years of his term, and he was very responsive in how he interacted with our office. And look, I think there's only one Republican that can beat Jon Ossoff, and that's Brian Kemp. I truly believe if Brian Kemp wants, and I don't have any sort of inside baseball information, if he decides to run, I think he could very, very likely beat Jon Ossoff. But I don't know if he runs or not. If this ends up being a litmus test on Donald Trump or Jon Ossoff, I certainly would never vote for Donald Trump or his surrogate, and I certainly would vote for Jon Ossoff in that environment. But look, we'll see how this plays out. if Donald Trump does what he does, then we're going to get a Republican candidate that acts like Herschel Walker or Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've had a couple of things to say about them over the years. So we'll see.
Actual last question, since we have 60 seconds
You
there.
tricked me.
Yeah. So I understand you're probably going to vote for Brian Kemp if it were to come to that. Do you have any sort of red lines whenever you decide whether or not you can support certain Republicans? Like if they say this, I cannot support them? Or is it just sort of, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it type of thing?
Well, I have a growing list. But I will tell you, the top of the list is if you think the 2020 election was rigged, you're dead to me.
Well, that is all of our time. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan.
Thank you.